There are many times I have gone hiking deep into the woods, far from any man-made structures, and I could only possibly get to these areas on foot. But yet, I found random trees cut down and wires that led nowhere. Some of these wires have been burned by a fire that swept the areas years ago, which shows how long the wires really have been there. The scary thing is that there is no reason they should be there. There are no homes or power lines within hundreds of miles of this area, which edged on my curiosity to follow them. And so one day, I did. They looped around trees and even went into the ground at some points, and I had to continue walking straight until I found them again. Whoever put them here went through a lot of effort because I could not imagine how heavy that wire must have been. It had to be more than just one person carrying the spool of wire. The cords were old and rusty and had pieces of black plastic that were burned and charred, layering parts of it. Then there were trees that had strange red markings dug deep into them. I wonder if it was some type of construction symbol that meant something involving the strange wires. Or the trees were marked by the Forest Service and were supposed to be cut down. However, the symbols were very strange. They seemed to be old-fashioned and had an ancient style to them. I was also worried that I might get electrocuted because storm clouds began to move into the area, and I could hear lightning strike far away that seemed to go with the clouds. So as I followed these wires, I saw other ones that were leading in the same direction but coming from other places. This brought eagerness in my step because it must have meant that I was coming close to the source of these wires, and I quickened my pace as I went up a steep, rocky mountainside. I soon noticed a sort of flat area up ahead that looked unnatural. As I got closer to it, I noticed that it dipped down in a crevice-type bowl. That's when I looked around, and there were about 20 different wires coming from all around the crevice that led into the center of it. I could now see what they led to. It was no Forest Service project or construction site. There were random rocks placed in strange formations all about the crevice. I walked into the middle of it, where there's a flat stone that was covered in a blackish-red crusty substance. On closer inspection, I could tell it was old, dried-up blood. What the hell is this place? I asked myself as I looked around and saw different types of animal skulls placed up on sticks and propped up on rocks. They were all neatly decorated and had the same markings I saw in the trees leading up to this point. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures of the area to show my friends later. I wondered if all these animal skulls were poached because there were so many of them. The altar in the middle seemed like it was some sort of sacrificial stone that you would see in history books about the Mayans and other cultures that performed sacrifices. They also had a makeshift fire pit made out of rocks near the altar. This has to be some sort of cult. Whoever made this went through such an effort to make sure that this was far away from society, and only the most determined people could find it, I thought to myself. As I continued to examine the area, I heard whispering coming from above me, and I peered up and saw about a dozen dark hooded figures gathered around the top of the bowl, all staring at me. They were so quiet and orderly in how they moved that they were able to surround me completely, without me even knowing. I quickly grabbed the closest rock to me and held it up as I screamed, "Don't any of you dare come closer to me. What is this place?" There was one man particularly that stood out. He wore a dark red cloak, while all the others just wore black. He raised both of his hands and all of them started chanting in some weird language I could not understand. Then the man lowers one of his hands, but points the other at me. What is going on? I think to myself, as they slowly begin to move closer to me. I throw the stone at the red-cloaked man, and it's a direct hit to his chest. But it bounced off like a bouncy ball, not slowing the man's slow walk towards me at all. Their chanting increasingly got louder as they got closer to me, and as it did, so did my heart rate. I quickly tried to run to a small gap between two of the cloaked figures, but they both grabbed me and threw me back down to the middle with incredible strength. Their chanting soon turned into yips like a coyote. It seemed like they were trying to summon something. Their leader clapped his hands, and as soon as he did, 4 cloaked people ran up on me and grabbed all of my limbs and pinned me down to the altar. "Let go of me," I screamed out. They did not listen and tightly grasped my limbs, nearly cutting off all my blood circulation. They then pinned me to the blood-stained altar. The weather seemed to grow worse. The storm clouds surrounded the sky above us. I couldn't wrap my mind about what was going on. How did I not notice any of these guys before? And how long have they been watching me? Some of them started a fire nearby in the makeshift fire pit they had. I should have never followed those damn wires. But how would I have known that they would have led to this? The cloaked man's chanting stopped as the leader came to me. He was holding jars that on further inspection I noticed carried human body parts. I became sick to my stomach at the sight, and wondered what my fate was going to be in their hands. The man then opened one of the jars that looked like it contained a heart, and stuck his hand into it. He then pulled out the heart and raised it to the sky. He said the first thing I could understand. "Praise the gods, for we have found a new heart for Kafifi." The man uttered as he raised the old heart into the air before he cast it into the fire. All of the others bowed down as the heart burned away, and it let out a loud squeal as the blood inside of it boiled. I was terrified, to the point that I didn't even try to fight back. I just laid there, in shock. He continued to do the same thing with all the other body parts that he had in the jars, and it all created a disgusting smell that scorched my nose. After burning all of the body parts, the man took his bloody hand and placed it upon my stomach, leaving a bloody handprint. I could hear lightning in the distance not too far from where we were. The man raised a knife above me, and that's when reality hit me. I'm going to die, I thought to myself as he plunged the knife into my stomach. I could feel the blade as it sharply dug into me. I kicked and fought all I could, but the cloaked man's grips only became tighter. The madman raised the knife again, and I looked away right before he was about to stab it into me. But there was a loud clap of thunder so close to me it made my ears feel like someone's pulled a trigger right next to my head. The grips that would be binding me down loosened, and that's when I kicked free and got up on my feet. I held my freshly dug wound and tried to keep as much blood as I could from coming out of it. That's when I saw the red-cloaked man on the ground, and his skin was fried off on one side of his body, where he held the metal knife. He was struck by lightning, I thought to myself. I then looked around, and while all the other cloaked figures were distracted, I took advantage of the opportunity and ran up the side of the crevice, knocking down some animal skulls as I did. As soon as I got to the top, I ran down the mountain, following the wires back to where I started. I needed to get to where I parked my car so I could get to a hospital as quickly as I could. The cloaked man began to chase me, and I ran with everything I had in me, even with the wound in my side. I then tripped on a stuck-up root from a nearby tree, which sent me barreling down the mountainside until I got stuck between two rocks. But luckily, I was hidden from the main sight of the men. I quickly pulled out my phone, and I noticed that I had one bar of a signal. And so I made a phone call to 911, informing that I was stuck and wounded in the mountains, and that I needed help getting out. I told them the general area I was in, and then they dispatched the Forest Service to find me and get me out of here. However, I was stuck there overnight. That night was terrifying. All through the darkness I could hear the cloaked men's mumbling chanting, and the breaking of nearby branches. All of them were looking for me. They were even screeching at points. It was like they were animals on the hunt. But luckily the Forest Service showed up with the morning sun, and the cloaked figures disappeared as fast and as strangely as they had appeared. I had lost a good amount of blood at this point, so I was sort of out of it, but when they questioned me at the hospital, I told them what I had seen and showed them the photos I had taken, and they later sent out people to investigate the area. However, all the wires leading to the cult's sacrificial altar were gone, so the forest rangers were unable to find it. Ever since that experience, I've always taken someone with me into the wilderness. So I'm going to warn you that if you ever come across a wire in the middle of the forest that does not belong there, whatever you do, do not follow it.